Hello and welcome to the Raw review here on Wrestling with Regret. Well, it's the season premiere of Raw, promising lots of exciting new faces. The landscape has changed oh so dramatically. How dramatic is it? Well, we're about to find out. The show opens up with Alexa Bliss in the ring. She says the poltergeist line, then says let him in. Out comes Bray Wyatt, the Fiend, making his spooky entrance to the ring. He and Alexa hold hands and stand perfectly still as Retribution make their way to the ring. They surround Bray and Alexa. They get in there. They're still completely unfazed, unmoved, unwavered by the presence of Retribution. Mustafa Ali tells them to attack them. The lights cut out. They teleport away. But then, after they're gone, the Hurt Business shows up, all four members, and we has scheduled 8-man tag match. As the match goes on, I'm wondering what happened to Mia Yim's character in all this. She showed up there when they stormed the ring, but by the time the match begins, she's long gone, not a part of this thing anymore. And by the way, what the hell happened to Mercedes Martinez in this push? As the match goes on, before the commercial break, the Fiend shows up on the screen and sticks his tongue out, and okie dokie. The match ends when Lashley puts T-Bar in the full Nelson and makes him tap out. But if that wasn't bad enough, out comes the Fiend once again to single-handedly take down all the members of Retribution except for Mustafa Ali, and the Hurt Business just stand there. The Fiend stares at them. Alexa Bliss shows up on the screen and then lip syncs Bray saying, "Let me in." Cut to black, spooky, spooky. Wow, what a great look for Retribution. I mean, first they debut with such hype and controversy and buzz and a little bit of promise as to what they could bring to the table as a character or as an entity. And then, they finally get the mask and they look very silly and very transparent. And then they start cutting promos and they finally have a match and they're signed to contracts. Then they gain a leader in Mustafa Ali, which was interesting. And then we didn't hear about them for a week or two. And here they lose. Not only do they lose clean as a whistle to a group where you can't tell if they're heels or faces on any given week anymore. Not only that, but then the Fiend comes out and just lays waste to them. Why should we even care anymore? Up next, Matt Riddle takes on AJ Styles, who's accompanied to the ring by the massive Jordan Amagbian. I mean, the size difference between these two is completely ridiculous. The former basketball player turned Chungus Ninja, turned bodyguard for Raw Underground, turned bodyguard for AJ Styles. The man's barely been on TV, and he's already had like 3 or 4 gimmick changes. Also, I love the fact that, even though his name shows up in the lower third when AJ shows up, the commentator's like, wow, who is this guy? I've never seen this person before. As if we didn't see him guard the door and letting Shane McMahon in the Raw Underground for weeks on end. They say that Booker T's in the Thunderdome crowd, if you believe them. Once Matt Riddle gets to the ring and the match begins, you can see right away they're trying to put over Umagbian as this very scary individual because he intimidates the referee. The referee tries to get him to leave, but Jordan grabs him by the arm and kind of brings it back down, stares at him for a long time before finally leaving, and then they just put over how intimidating of a presence he is during the match itself because Matt tries to do like a dive off the apron, but Jordan just kind of stands in his way. Then near the end, both Matt and AJ fall off the top rope to the outside. Umagbian spooks Riddle again. He walks back in the ring and walks right into a Styles clash for AJ to win. So the dividends are already paying off in a big way with AJ's new very, very tall muscle. Need to see what happens to them down the line, but it will take a lot for me to convince me that Umagbian's a better corner man than, say, Joseph Park. We get a recap of the Randy Orton-Drew McIntyre feud thus far. Then we see Drew being interviewed backstage. Drew admits that yes, Orton has a method to his madness throughout this whole feud between theirs. And yes, Orton has far more experience in Hell in a Cell than Drew does. He's never had a Hell in a Cell match until this Sunday. But he says, experience is great, but life experience is also very important too. And Drew has a lot of life experience. Then he says, hey, in your promo later on, I'm going to interrupt it. Up next, Lana, who last week won a Battle Royal to earn this opportunity, challenges Asuka for the Raw Women's Championship. Lana does not get instantly murdered as the match begins. She's able to throw down, hit Asuka with a couple of kicks, but eventually Asuka wakes up and wipes the floor with Lana, makes her tap to the Asuka lock, but we don't even hear Asuka's music play when the tag team champions, Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler, make their way to the ring. Lana suffers the sins of Miro yet again, being slammed to the announce table. Asuka's able to thwart their attack and she's able to escape. And then as far as the match itself, I don't know what I expected. I guess Lana didn't shit the bed in this one, so it was a quick one and done thing. The post-match beatdown was kind of a surprise, but I'm not sure if it's leading to anything with these 3 women because soon after the commercial break, we see Nia and Shayna in the ring cutting a promo saying, hey, we're the tag team champions, therefore we own the Raw and SmackDown Women's division. Who's going to challenge us? Who can refute that? Out come Mandy Rose and Dana Brooke, and then Lacey Evans and Peyton Royce, who are apparently a team now, and they're not getting along. Why did you break up the Iconics if you're just going to put Peyton in a tag team right away after that? And then we see the Riot Squad, who are SmackDown talent, officially, but they're here on Raw anyway. what does the draft even mean? So then we has impromptu, non-title fatal four-way. You see Lacey diving onto everybody, Liv and Ruby dive onto everybody else. Lacey Evans eats all the finishers here, not just from the Riot Squad, but then also from Nia Jax as the champions win this match here. I thought the end of the match was pretty entertaining, and I'm having a growing, interest and intrigue in the tag team champions, Shayna and Nia. You can tell there's like the subtle back and forth in their promo before this matchup. It's like they still don't like each other, but they have this kind of like begrudging, chemistry, and they're able to kind of like work their issues out in the ring if they're still like on the same page. It's kind of like two bullies independent of each other who have like a similar dislike for everyone else. They can find some common ground. I thought it was a good win for them here, and let's keep it going. It's time for Elias's Unforgettable concert. He's got a live house band with him on stage. We get some canned Walk with Elias chants before he goes into his music. It's actually 2 songs from his album, which apparently is a real thing and is dropping next week. Last week when they said that, I wasn't so sure if it was a real thing, but it turns out to be a real thing. So Elias is done with his songs. He gets a big ovation from this just totally organic crowd. He goes back for an encore, but then somebody took his guitar and done busted out a wicked guitar solo to steal his thunder. It's Jeff Hardy who comes out swinging with a guitar. Elias ducks and runs away. Jeff's music plays, and for a split second I'm like, man, wouldn't it be so cool if the live band just picked up on that right away, starts jamming out to Jeff Hardy's theme like as it's playing. Anyway, we find out later on that Elias challenges Jeff to a match at Hell in a Cell, and maybe the winner gets the security footage to what happened outside the Performance Center 5 months ago. The Miz and John Morrison are backstage talking about their evil schemes when Tucker confronts them. He and Otis got split up by the draft this past week as well. He says he's going to find a tag team partner tonight to challenge them. Miz and Morrison have some banter before they laugh and laugh. Then up next, Kofi Kingston takes on Sheamus in singles action. Kofi and Xavier before the match talk about how wild 2020's been. Sheamus interrupts and spoils the fun and everything, and these two trade barbs back and forth, and Sheamus says he was getting tired of all the crying they were doing last week in their farewell match. Kofi and Xavier make fun of Sheamus for losing to Big E in that street fight a couple of weeks ago. Big E, by the way, in the Thunderdome crowd now. We see him a lot in the hard cam. Also, the mic around Xavier is very much open as this match goes on. His audio is almost too distracting in this, but the match itself is pretty good here. Kofi ends up winning with the Trouble in Paradise after a very well-fought contest, and we even see Mark Henry in the cyber crowd. Hooray! We then get a backstage promo from Mustafa Ali, who's surrounded by Retribution. He says his power is not in strength and numbers, but in creating chaos. That's what he wants to do with Retribution. He admits just openly to having been the SmackDown hacker many months ago, which we all kind of assumed was the case, but now he's finally kind of out and says it, kind of wraps that up in a nice little bow, I guess. He says he was the hacker because the whole company was sick with greed and corruption, and it's leaving good men and women out in the cold and left to die, basically, by WWE. And if anyone tries to stop the truth from being heard, then the Retribution will shut them down. Kind of like how they shut down the Hurt Business and the Fiend earlier tonight, right? I mean, the promo by Mustafa Ali was really good. He finally has his motives. We finally get why he started Retribution, or why he's leading Retribution at least. It was good to get some resolution as to him being the hacker, even if, again, like the payoff to that was kind of like, underwhelming, like how we're going to tie. Now we can find out how we can tie the hacker and Retribution together, which a lot of people are kind of theorizing. But I mean, could they have not done this promo before their match where they got, chumpatized? Could they have not had a match at all and then they could have cut this promo anyway? I think it would have made Retribution look so much better. Even though this promo was good, all the action that took place in the first hour really negated whatever cool factor came from that promo here. And it makes you just wonder, it's like, where can Retribution go from here? It's like, that loss didn't matter. Well, it should. Like, if that's your goal, is to just take down WWE, you should be able to beat these guys. Like, that should be a motive for you guys. It should be a factor, at least, some kind of. Backstage, Titus O'Neil wants to join the Hurt Business, but they emphatically and violently reject him, poor Titus. In our next match, The Miz and John Morrison take on Tucker and his tag team partner, El Gran Gordo, which I think translates to the Big Fat. It's clearly Otis in a mask. He even still has the Money in the Bank lunch pail. The Miz and Morrison see right through this clever disguise, and basically, Miz takes great offense to Otis's just very existence. He's basically an affront to everything The Miz holds true and dear when it comes to WWE and what makes championship material. He says, being being called the underdog is just code for people feeling sorry for Otis. He says he knows how to play the system, which is why he got Heavy Machinery broke up and why Otis and Mandy got separated. I feel that clip is going to be played back in the eventual trial they've been delaying. It's going to come back to bite him when he says that somehow. Like, ooh, it makes him seem like he had ill intent. As the match goes on, because we have the match, Gordo gets the hot tag. We get some references to Mil Mascaris. I hear a Revolting Blob reference at one point. I don't know if there was a Nacho Libre reference in there, but there should have been. Gordo flattens Miz with the Torta, and that's how not Heavy Machinery win. Then backstage, Mandy Rose shows up and gives not Otis a big ham, and they all dance the New Day. Can they still be dating if they all work in the same building, even though they're on different shows? Also, is there going to be punishment because Otis is a SmackDown guy and he just went over to Raw? 2 instances on this show, on the season premiere, after they spent this whole weekend, splitting up the rosters and changing things up. We have the Riot Squad on Raw, we got Otis on Raw, and they're both SmackDown talent, and we pass the grace period where we wrap up all those little things. And we're still here. So again, what does any of this mean? How can we take that seriously when they don't take it seriously? It's time for another edition of the Firefly Funhouse. Bray Wyatt's unpacking his moving boxes. They're moving the Funhouse to Raw. He pulls up the mallet, the Strowman sheep mask, and the crucifix from the past version of Bray, which I thought was very funny. And then talks about new beginnings and fresh starts. Ramblin' Rabbit reveals he's got a wife and kids Bray never knew about because Rabbit says, "You never asked." And so then Bray promises to be a better friend, but Mercy the Buzzard eats the rabbit anyway. Bray reveals his new friend Alexa Bliss. She's in the Funhouse and she's wearing a Freddy Krueger style tattered shirt. This is the best that's yet to come. They wave at the camera and bye-bye. I feel like Bray's involvement in the show tonight was all over the place. I think a lot of my problems with the show could have been resolved if he just was not a part of that first segment where he shows up, they get interrupted by Retribution, and then they just go away and then come back to beat up Retribution. If it was just Bray wasn't involved, we had Hurt Business in the Retribution, even if they lost, other things being the same, and then we had Mustafa cut his promo in the third hour, and then we had Firefly Funhouse, I think that would have been better. And by the way, one thing about the beatdown on Titus I forgot to mention, you have to have that there because you have to establish, they're still heels, by the way. So everything just feels garbled up and just you don't know what's what or why things are there or why things are being done. This is a really frustrating episode of Raw in that respect. I thought this was a good episode of Firefly Funhouse. I thought it was funny, and we're kind of foreshadowing what's Alexa Bliss going to do, what are these two going to do together as a unit. Again, that all is fine, but him being involved in the first hour, that first segment with Retribution, I think just kind of threw the whole show into a tailspin for me. In their first official match on Raw, since the last one was an exhibition, you've got Braun Strowman taking on Keith Lee. Strowman still selling the ribs after getting the hell beat out of him by Roman Reigns this past Friday. Ric Flair is watching in the Thunderdome crowd. The match itself, I don't think it was that great. Kind of a downgrade from their big fight a few weeks ago in the unofficial exhibition matchup here. Strowman with a very sneaky headbutt to Lee's groin as he's getting picked up for the Spirit Bomb. Hits a big boot to win the match. And so then afterward though, Lee gets right back up, takes Braun to Dick Kick City, tells him he messed with the wrong one. Is this finally the turning point here where Lee is no longer bound by these really shitty finishers? This is kind of the beginning of a meaner, nastier Keith Lee where we don't get these garbage things. Are we going to have a ball for a ball at Hell in a Cell now? Either way, for a main event of the show, I thought I was pretty unimpressed. Your final segment is Randy Orton's Message from Hell, where he delivers a soliloquy inside the Hell in a Cell, which is lowered around the ring for this. And Orton, he padlocks himself into the cell as he delivers the speech. He says he's never left a part of himself in the cell like the legend suggests happens, but he's always learned more about himself every time he leaves the cell match. As he talks about his history in the cell match, winning championships, standing up to legends and stuff. He compares legends to legendary moments, and as he's talking about that, Drew McIntyre interrupts and they're facing off and Orton's like, "What are you going to do about it? You can't get in to fight me." Then Drew walks away and produces some bolt cutters, and you can immediately see Orton's face turn white. He's terrified of Drew coming in there. So Drew breaks open the chain, gets in the cell, closes the door behind him, and we fade to black, which I thought was actually the more I'm thinking about it right now, was actually a pretty good way to close it off. It's one of those things where, the live crowd, if there was one, would have seen some big fight at the end and it would have been great. I think them cutting off the way they did makes it they're out of time, kind of the spontaneous nature of it. I thought that was kind of cool. In the middle of that action where you want to see there's a confrontation, you don't get to see it, you have to wait until the pay-per-view. So finally, it took the entire 3-hour length of the show, but you finally had something that made me kind of want to see the pay-per-view. My grade for this week's Raw is a D. I think with this show, as I was watching it, there were 3 or 4 really big hooks for this episode. There was Retribution, who had a very poor showing, the Fiend, who I thought was used a bit excessively, especially in the first hour, and Strowman versus Lee, which was very underwhelming. Meanwhile, how are we doing with that big pay-per-view we're supposed to have this Sunday? It's one of those times where it's like they have 2 big things they're trying to reconcile in one show. Like, hey, there's this big momentous thing about the episode itself, this being, season premiere or whatever, but also we have to plug this pay-per-view happening in 6 days. We've seen this happen before where they have a really hard time balancing those things. As far as a season premiere goes, like to kick off the next year of Raw, there were a couple of things I liked and kind of set in motion. Oh, this might be interesting. But a lot of it felt like kind of like rehashing, or kind of like we're gonna have to wait and see what happens next, or some steps back in terms of Retribution, more steps back in terms of the continuity of like what roster members really officially go where. I thought there were a couple of good moments, but this episode was a real chore to get through. And like I said, the main event segment, Orton and Drew, that was the one thing about this show that actually got me kind of more interested in the pay-per-view itself. And that of the 3 cell matches, that's the one I'm least interested in. But let me know what you thought about Raw this week in the comments section below. Stay tuned for later this week with my Hell in a Cell predictions video. And speaking of later in the week, be sure to tune in to this Friday at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern for my live riffing of Just Another Romantic Wrestling Comedy with my special guests April Hunter and Colt Cabana. It's going to be a ton of fun. I can't wait for it to happen this Friday afternoon. Hope to see you there. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.